front of the 500 wedding guests. I told you we should have left them with a babysitter. Jonathan Pierce, worth over $3 billion and known for his calm demeanor in business, felt completely helpless as he held his screaming son while Patricia awkwardly balanced baby Emma. The expensive Italian suit felt tight around his shoulders as sweat beaded on his forehead. He had fired 3 nannies in the past month because none of them could handle the twins properly. The cathedral, decorated with thousands of white roses and crystal chandeliers, seemed to amplify every sob and scream. Archbishop Williams cleared his throat repeatedly, hoping the crying would stop, but the babies only grew more distressed. Guests began whispering among themselves, checking their phones, and some even started leaving. Maybe we should postpone this, Jonathan whispered to Patricia, bouncing baby Ethan gently, but nothing worked. Postpone? Patricia's voice rose an octave. Do you know how much this wedding cost? How many important people are here? I am not postponing my wedding because of your babies. The words stung. Your babies. Not our babies. Patricia had made it clear from the beginning that she was marrying Jonathan Pierce the billionaire, not Jonathan Pierce the father. She tolerated the twins but never truly accepted them as part of their future together. Baby Emma's cries reached a new level, and Patricia thrust the infant toward Jonathan. Take her. I cannot do this anymore. Without another word, she gathered her elaborate wedding dress and stormed down the aisle, leaving Jonathan standing alone at the altar with 2 screaming babies. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the twins' continued crying. 500 pairs of eyes stared at the abandoned groom, and camera phones captured every moment of his humiliation. The man who commanded boardrooms and closed billion-dollar deals stood frozen, completely defeated by 2 tiny humans. Have you ever felt completely alone in a room full of people? What would you do if everything you thought you wanted crumbled in an instant? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories of love overcoming impossible odds. Archbishop Williams approached Jonathan slowly. Perhaps we should move to a quieter location, son? Jonathan nodded numbly, still trying to calm the babies. As he turned to leave, he noticed a woman in a simple blue cleaning uniform standing near the back of the cathedral. She had been quietly cleaning the side areas during the ceremony, but now she stepped forward. Sir, she said softly, her voice carrying a warmth that somehow cut through the chaos. May I help? Jonathan looked at her properly for the first time. She was a beautiful African-American woman, probably in her late 20s, with gentle brown eyes and a kind face. Her name tag read Camille. Without waiting for his answer, she approached slowly, her movements calm and confident. It's okay, babies, Camille whispered, extending her arms toward Emma. Let Camille help you feel better. Something in her tone made Jonathan hand over baby Emma without hesitation. The moment Camille took the infant, she began a soft humming sound, swaying gently from side to side. Within seconds, Emma's cries softened to whimpers. How did you? Jonathan began, amazed. Sometimes babies just need to feel safe, Camille said, continuing her gentle swaying. May I hold the other little one? Jonathan passed Ethan to her as well, and she cradled both babies against her chest. Her humming continued, a melody that seemed to wrap around the twins like a warm blanket. Within 2 minutes, both babies were completely quiet, looking up at Camille with wide, curious eyes. The remaining wedding guests stared in amazement. This cleaning lady had accomplished what expensive nannies, pediatricians, and child specialists could not. She had brought peace to the chaos. What's your name? Jonathan asked, his voice thick with emotion and gratitude. Camille Washington, sir, she replied, still gently rocking the twins. I work for the cathedral's cleaning service. Camille, Jonathan repeated, the name feeling important somehow. Thank you. I don't know how to repay you for this. No need for repayment, sir, Camille said with a genuine smile. These little ones just needed some love. They're beautiful babies. For the first time in months, Jonathan felt a sense of calm wash over him. Not because of his wealth or power, but because someone had shown genuine kindness to his children without expecting anything in return. The wedding guests are leaving, Archbishop Williams informed them quietly. The bride has departed as well. Jonathan looked around the nearly empty cathedral, then back at Camille, who was still successfully keeping the twins content. In this moment of complete humiliation and abandonment, a stranger had offered help without judgment. Camille, he said carefully, would you consider helping me take care of them? Just temporarily until I can find a proper nanny? Camille looked surprised. Sir, I'm just a cleaning lady. I don't have any formal training with babies. You just did something no one else could do, Jonathan replied. These babies trust you. I can see it in their faces. Please, I'll pay you well, and it would just be temporary. Camille looked down at the peaceful twins, then back at Jonathan. She could see the desperation and genuine love in his eyes. This wasn't about money or convenience. This was about a father who needed help caring for his children. I would be honored to help, sir, she said softly. But I have my other job responsibilities. I'll take care of everything, Jonathan said quickly. Please just say yes. Then yes, Mr. Pierce, Camille replied with a warm smile. I'll help you take care of these precious babies. As they walked out of the cathedral together, Jonathan carrying his suit jacket and Camille holding both twins, neither of them knew that this moment would change their lives forever. The billionaire who had lost a bride had found something far more valuable. Someone who loved his children unconditionally. The photographer captured one last image. A powerful man in an expensive suit walking beside a humble cleaning lady, both focused entirely on the peaceful babies in her arms. It was a picture that would later become the symbol of their extraordinary love story. Behind them, the abandoned wedding decorations stood as a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come from the most unexpected endings. Jonathan Pierce sat in his penthouse office the next morning, staring at the newspaper headline, "Billionaire Abandoned at Altar." The photos showed Patricia storming out and Camille holding his twins. His phone had been ringing non-stop with reporters, business associates and curious friends wanting the inside story. But all Jonathan could think about was how peaceful Ethan and Emma had looked in Camille's arms. His assistant, Rebecca Martinez, knocked and entered with coffee. "Sir, the board meeting has been moved to this afternoon. Also, there are 17 interview requests from media outlets." "Cancel all interviews," Jonathan said without looking up. "And reschedule the board meeting. I need to be home with the twins." Rebecca looked surprised. In 5 years of working for Jonathan, she had never known him to put anything before business. "Are you sure, sir?" "The quarterly reports." "The reports can wait," Jonathan said firmly. "My children cannot." After Rebecca left, Jonathan's mind wandered back to how everything had started. 8 months ago, he had been dating Sophia Chin, a successful lawyer who seemed perfect on paper. She was intelligent, beautiful, and came from a wealthy family. When she told him she was pregnant with twins, Jonathan had been nervous but excited about becoming a father. The pregnancy was difficult. Sophia became increasingly resentful, claiming the babies were ruining her figure and her career. She stopped coming to doctor appointments and started staying out late with friends. Jonathan tried to be supportive, buying her everything she wanted and hiring the best medical team money could buy. When Ethan and Emma were born, Jonathan felt a love he had never experienced before. These tiny, perfect beings were his children, his legacy, his heart walking around outside his body. But Sophia felt differently. "I never wanted this," she had told him in the hospital, refusing to hold the babies. "I thought I did, but I was wrong. I'm not mother material, Jonathan." "We can work through this," Jonathan had pleaded. "Maybe you have postpartum depression. We can get help." "It's not depression," Sophia had replied coldly. "I just don't want them. I never should have had them." 3 days after bringing the twins home, Jonathan woke up to find Sophia packing her bags. On the kitchen counter, she had left a legal document relinquishing all parental rights and a note that simply read, "I'm sorry. They deserve better than me." Since then, Jonathan had been struggling alone. He hired the most expensive nannies in the city, but none of them lasted more than a few weeks. The twins were difficult babies, crying constantly and refusing to sleep. Pediatricians found nothing wrong. They were healthy babies who simply seemed unhappy. Jonathan had tried everything. He read parenting books, attended single-father support groups, and even took time off work to care for them himself. But nothing worked. The twins cried day and night, and Jonathan felt like he was failing as a father. His engagement to Patricia had been a business arrangement as much as a romantic one. She came from old money, understood his social circle, and seemed sophisticated enough to handle his lifestyle. She had agreed to marry him despite the twins, though she made it clear they would hire full-time help and send the children to boarding school as soon as possible. Now, sitting in his office, Jonathan realized how wrong that whole relationship had been. Patricia had never once tried to comfort the twins when they cried. She had never shown any maternal instinct or genuine care for them. He had been so desperate for help and companionship that he had ignored all the warning signs. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was the security guard from his penthouse building. "Mr. Pierce, there's a Camille Washington here to see you. She says you're expecting her?" Jonathan's heart lifted for the first time in hours. "Yes, send her up immediately." While waiting, Jonathan looked around his pristine penthouse. Everything was white marble, glass, and expensive artwork. The nursery was perfectly decorated with the finest furniture money could buy, but it felt cold and impersonal. Maybe that was part of the problem. When Camille arrived, she was carrying a simple bag and wearing clean jeans and a soft yellow sweater. She looked nervous but determined. "Good morning, Mr. Pierce," she said politely. "I hope you still want my help." "More than you know," Jonathan replied, leading her to the nursery. They didn't sleep well last night. Actually, they never sleep well. The twins were in their cribs, whimpering softly. The moment Camille entered the room, she went straight to them, speaking in that same gentle voice from the day before. "Good morning, sweet babies," she cooed, picking up Emma first. "Did you miss Camille?" "It's okay, I'm here now." Emma immediately settled against Camille's shoulder, and Ethan stopped crying when she picked him up with her other arm. Jonathan watched in amazement as both babies relaxed completely. "How do you do that?" he asked. "I think babies can sense when someone genuinely cares about them," Camille replied, sitting in the rocking chair. "They know the difference between someone who's paid to be here and someone who wants to be here." The words hit Jonathan hard. All the nannies he had hired were professionals doing a job. But Camille was here because she wanted to help. "Tell me about yourself, Camille," Jonathan said, sitting across from her. "I realize I don't know anything about you except that you have a gift with children." Camille smiled, continuing to rock the twins. "There's not much to tell, sir. I'm 28 years old. I live with my grandmother in Brooklyn. I work 3 jobs to pay for her medical expenses and to save money for college." "College?" Jonathan asked, interested. "I want to study early childhood development," Camille explained. "I've always loved working with children. I volunteer at a daycare center on weekends and help neighbor kids with homework. But college is expensive and Grandma needs her medications." Jonathan felt a surge of respect for this woman. She was working 3 jobs, caring for a sick relative and still finding time to help others. Meanwhile, he had been feeling sorry for himself despite having every advantage in life. "What's your grandmother's condition?" he asked gently. "Diabetes and heart problems," Camille replied. "She raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 7. She's the most important person in my world." "I'm sorry about your parents," Jonathan said sincerely. "Thank you, sir. Grandma always says everything happens for a reason. Maybe I'm here to help these beautiful babies and maybe they're here to teach me something too." Jonathan looked at his children, so peaceful in Camille's arms, and felt something shift inside him. For the first time since they were born he felt hope. "Camille," he said carefully, "what would it take for you to consider this a permanent position? I mean, if you wanted to." Camille looked surprised. "Sir, I appreciate the offer, but I don't have any formal qualifications. You could hire someone with proper credentials and experience." "I've hired people with credentials," Jonathan replied. "None of them could do what you're doing right now. These babies need you, Camille. And honestly, so do I." The twins had fallen asleep in her arms, looking more peaceful than Jonathan had ever seen them. Camille looked down at them with such tenderness that Jonathan felt his chest tighten with emotion. "If you're serious about this offer," Camille said slowly, "I would need to make sure my grandmother is properly cared for. And I would still want to continue my education." "Done," Jonathan said immediately. "I'll arrange for the best medical care for your grandmother, and I'll pay for your college education. Whatever you need." Camille's eyes widened. "Sir, that's too generous. I couldn't possibly accept so much." "Camille," Jonathan said earnestly, "yesterday you saved not just my wedding but my children's well-being. Money means nothing compared to their happiness. Please let me do this." Camille was quiet for a long moment, gently stroking Emma's hair. "My grandmother always taught me to accept help when it's offered with a kind heart," she said finally. "I can see that you truly love these babies. I would be honored to help you raise them." As Jonathan watched Camille with his children, he realized that Patricia's abandonment might have been the best thing that ever happened to him. Sometimes losing what you think you want leads you to what you actually need. The billionaire who had everything discovered that the most valuable things in life could not be bought. Genuine love, kindness, and someone who cared for his children as if they were her own. Camille Washington stood in her small Brooklyn apartment that evening, looking around at the modest space she shared with her 72-year-old grandmother, Dorothy Washington. The contrast between this tiny 2-bedroom apartment and Jonathan Pierce's marble penthouse was striking, but this place was filled with something his mansion lacked: warmth and love. "Grandma," Camille called softly, entering the living room where Dorothy sat in her favorite armchair, working on a crossword puzzle. Despite her health problems, Dorothy remained sharp and spirited, her silver hair always perfectly styled and her brown eyes bright with wisdom. "How did your new job go today, baby girl?" Dorothy asked, setting down her pencil and giving Camille her full attention. Camille sat on the worn but comfortable couch, still amazed by the day's events. "Grandma, you're not going to believe what happened." She told her grandmother everything, about the wedding disaster, meeting Jonathan Pierce, and the job offer that seemed too good to be true. Dorothy listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally and raising her eyebrows at certain parts. "So this billionaire man wants to pay for my medical care and your education just for taking care of his babies?" Dorothy asked when Camille finished. "I know it sounds crazy," Camille replied. "But Grandma, you should see these little ones. They're 4 months old and they've been through so much already. Their mother abandoned them and their father is trying his best, but he's struggling." Dorothy studied her granddaughter's face carefully. She had raised Camille since she was 7 years old, and she knew every expression and emotion that crossed the young woman's features. "You already love those babies, don't you?" Dorothy asked gently. Camille felt tears well up in her eyes. "Is it wrong that I do? I just met them yesterday, but when I held them, it felt right, Grandma. It felt like I was meant to be there." "Child, there's nothing wrong with a heart that loves easily," Dorothy said, reaching over to pat Camille's hand. "Your mother was the same way. She could make any crying baby stop just by holding them." Camille had few memories of her parents, but she treasured the stories Dorothy shared about them. Her mother, Angela, had been a kindergarten teacher who dreamed of opening her own daycare center. Her father, Robert, had been a social worker who dedicated his life to helping children in need. "Do you think Mama and Daddy would approve of this job?" Camille asked. "Honey, your parents would be proud of the woman you've become," Dorothy replied firmly. "You work 3 jobs to take care of me, you volunteer with children every weekend, and you still find time to help your neighbors. Now you have a chance to do what you love while securing our future. Of course they would approve." Camille felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Dorothy's approval meant everything to her. This woman had sacrificed her own retirement dreams to raise Camille, working double shifts as a hospital aide well into her 60s to make sure Camille had everything she needed. "But Grandma," Camille said hesitantly, "what if I'm not good enough? What if I mess up and those babies get hurt? Mr. Pierce is trusting me with the most important things in his life." Dorothy stood up slowly, her arthritis making movement difficult, and sat beside Camille on the couch. She took her granddaughter's hands in her weathered ones. "Baby girl, let me tell you something about yourself that you might not see," Dorothy said. "When Mrs. Johnson's grandbaby was colicky and crying for hours, who did she call? When little Tommy next door was having nightmares, who sat with him until he felt safe? When the daycare center needed someone to handle their most difficult children, who did they ask for? You." Camille listened, feeling her confidence slowly building. "You have a gift, Camille," Dorothy continued. "Not everyone is meant to work with children, but you are. It's not just about knowing what to do, it's about having a heart that children can trust. And from what you've told me about those twins, they already trust you." "I'm scared, Grandma," Camille admitted. "This could change everything for us." "Sometimes change is exactly what we need," Dorothy replied with a smile. "I've been praying for years that you'd get the chance to go to college and follow your dreams. Maybe this is God's way of answering those prayers." That night, Camille lay in bed thinking about her life and the unexpected opportunity that had presented itself. She had always known she wanted to work with children, but her circumstances had made that dream seem impossible. Growing up, she had been an excellent student despite the tragedy of losing her parents. Dorothy had worked tirelessly to provide for them, but there was never enough money for extras like college funds or career counseling. Camille had accepted that she would work multiple low-paying jobs to support her grandmother and maybe someday save enough for college. But she had never stopped dreaming. Every weekend at the community daycare center, she watched how different children responded to different approaches. She read parenting books from the library and took free online courses about child development. She had natural instincts, but she wanted to learn the science behind them. The next morning, Camille arrived at Jonathan's penthouse early, carrying a small bag with some of her grandmother's homemade baby food recipes and a few children's books she had bought with her own money. Jonathan met her at the door looking exhausted. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, and his expensive shirt was wrinkled. "They had a rough night," he admitted, leading her to the nursery. "I don't think any of us slept more than an hour at a time." In the nursery, both twins were crying in their cribs. Camille immediately went to work, picking up Emma while speaking in her gentle, soothing voice. "Good morning, sweet Emma," she whispered. "Camille is here now. Everything is going to be okay. She then picked up Ethan, holding both babies against her chest and beginning her soft humming. Within minutes, both twins were quiet and alert, looking up at her with wide, trusting eyes. How do you do that every time? Jonathan asked, amazement clear in his voice. I think they remember feeling safe with me, Camille replied. Babies are smarter than people give them credit for. They know who they can trust. As she cared for the twins throughout the day, Camille noticed things that others might have missed. Emma liked to be held a certain way when she was tired, and Ethan responded better to gentle bouncing than rocking when he was fussy. She paid attention to their different personalities and adjusted her approach accordingly. Emma is more sensitive, she explained to Jonathan as she fed the babies. She gets overwhelmed easily by loud noises or too much stimulation. Ethan is more outgoing, but he needs more physical comfort when he's upset. Jonathan watched her work with genuine admiration. No nanny had ever taken the time to understand his children's individual needs. They had treated the twins like identical problems to be solved rather than unique little people with their own personalities. Camille, he said carefully, I want you to know that I meant what I said yesterday. About your grandmother's medical care and your education. I've already spoken with my personal physician about arranging the best care for her. Camille looked up from feeding Emma, her eyes bright with gratitude. Mr. Pierce, I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me, Jonathan replied. You're giving my children something I couldn't buy with all my money, genuine love and care. As the day progressed, Camille felt more confident in her decision. These babies did need her and she was good at caring for them. More than that, being with them felt like coming home in a way she had never experienced before. Do you believe that sometimes the most important moments in life come from unexpected places? How do you think this story will unfold? Share your thoughts and subscribe to see what happens next in this incredible journey. When Dorothy called that evening to check on her, Camille was able to report that both twins had napped well, eaten properly, and played contentedly. They're such good babies, Grandma, Camille said. They just needed someone to understand them. Sounds like you understand them perfectly, Dorothy replied. And it sounds like their father is beginning to understand what a blessing you are. As Camille tucked the twins into their cribs that night, singing a lullaby her grandmother had sung to her, she realized that this job was already becoming something more than employment. These children were becoming part of her heart and she was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she was meant to be. The gentle cleaning lady who had stepped forward to help a crying billionaire was discovering that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as simple acts of kindness. 3 weeks had passed since Camille began caring for the twins, and the change in the Pierce household was remarkable. What had once been a place of constant crying and chaos had transformed into a home filled with baby laughter and peaceful moments. Jonathan stood in his office doorway watching Camille in the living room with Ethan and Emma. She had set up a soft blanket on the floor and was lying on her stomach, making funny faces at the babies while they reached for colorful toys. The twins were giggling, a sound Jonathan had rarely heard before Camille arrived. Mr. Pierce, Camille called out, noticing him watching. Come play with your babies. They've been asking for their daddy all morning. Jonathan smiled at her gentle exaggeration. He had been working from home more often since Camille started, wanting to spend more time with his children. To his surprise, work hadn't suffered. If anything, he was more focused and productive when he did work because he wasn't constantly worried about the twins. Have they really been asking for me? He asked, settling down on the blanket beside them. Oh yes, Camille replied with a grin, holding up Emma. Emma here was just telling me she wants to show Daddy how she can grab her toes. And Ethan has been practicing his smile for you. Jonathan lay down next to Camille, and immediately both babies turned their attention to him. Emma reached out tiny fingers to touch his face, and Ethan made happy babbling sounds. They're so different when you're around, Jonathan marveled. Before you came, they cried whenever I held them. I started to think they didn't like me. Babies can sense stress and anxiety, Camille explained, gently guiding Jonathan's hand to help Emma sit up. When you were worried and tense, they felt that energy. Now that you're more relaxed, they are too. Jonathan realized she was right. The constant stress of dealing with crying babies, work pressures, and Patricia's complaints had made him tense and anxious whenever he was with the twins. Now, knowing they were happy and well cared for, he could actually enjoy being their father. Camille, he said thoughtfully, I want to ask you something and please be honest. Are you happy here? I know this is a big change from your other jobs. Camille smiled as she helped Ethan roll over onto his stomach. Mr. Pierce, I wake up every morning excited to see these little ones. I've never had a job that felt this fulfilling. But you must miss your other work, your friends, your normal routine, Jonathan pressed. My normal routine was getting up at 5 a.m. to clean office buildings, then rushing to the diner for lunch shift, then going to the hotel for evening cleaning, Camille replied. I was exhausted all the time and I barely saw my grandmother except late at night. Now I have a job I love, I can visit grandma every evening, and I'm earning enough to actually save money for the first time in my life. Jonathan felt a wave of guilt. While he had been feeling grateful for Camille's help, he hadn't fully considered how difficult her previous life had been. 3 jobs, constant exhaustion, no time for herself or her dreams. What about your social life? He asked. Do you have a boyfriend? Friends you're missing? Camille laughed softly. Mr. Pierce, when exactly would I have had time for a boyfriend? Between 3 jobs and taking care of grandma, I barely had time to sleep. That doesn't seem fair, Jonathan said quietly. You're 28 years old. You should be going out, having fun, dating. I'm exactly where I want to be, Camille replied firmly, picking up Emma for a cuddle. These babies need me and caring for them doesn't feel like work. It feels like love. The word hung in the air between them. Love. It was clear that Camille loved his children, and Jonathan felt a deep gratitude for that. But it was more than gratitude he was feeling lately when he looked at her. Over the past 3 weeks, Jonathan had started noticing things about Camille beyond her skill with the twins. He noticed how she hummed while she worked, how she always smelled like something pleasant and comforting, how her laugh made him smile even when he was stressed about business deals. He noticed how she spoke to everyone with respect, from the doorman to the grocery delivery person. He noticed how she called her grandmother every day and always asked about the neighbors and people in her community. He noticed how she read to the twins from books she had bought with her own money before he hired her. Most importantly, he noticed how the penthouse felt like a real home when she was there. Mr. Pierce, Camille said hesitantly, can I ask you something personal? Of course, Jonathan replied, though he felt nervous about what she might ask. Do you miss her? The woman who was supposed to be your wife. Jonathan was quiet for a moment, considering his answer honestly. I thought I would, he said finally. But I don't miss Patricia at all. I think I miss the idea of having a partner, someone to share parenting responsibilities with. But Patricia never really wanted to be part of the twins' lives anyway. What about their mother? Camille asked gently. Do you think she'll ever come back? No, Jonathan said with certainty. Sophia made it very clear that she wants nothing to do with motherhood. She signed away all her parental rights and asked me never to contact her. Camille's expression was sad but understanding. Those babies are so lucky to have a father who loves them so much. Not every child has that. They're lucky to have you too, Jonathan said, meaning it completely. Their conversation was interrupted by Jonathan's phone ringing. It was his business manager with news about a potential merger that needed his immediate attention. Take the call, Camille said, scooping up both twins. We'll be in the nursery when you're done. As Jonathan dealt with business matters, he could hear Camille singing to the babies down the hall. Her voice was soft and melodic, and he found it hard to concentrate on financial reports when all he wanted was to go back to the family room and lie on the floor with his children and the woman who cared for them so lovingly. When he finished his call an hour later, he found Camille in the nursery, both twins fast asleep in their cribs. She was sitting in the rocking chair, writing in a small notebook. What are you working on? He asked quietly. I'm keeping a journal about the twins' development, she explained, showing him pages of detailed notes. Things like when they smile, what foods they prefer, how long they sleep, what seems to upset them. I thought it might be helpful for you to have this information. Jonathan looked at the careful, detailed notes and felt his chest tighten with emotion. No one had ever cared enough about his children to document their lives so thoughtfully. Camille, he said softly, you go above and beyond every single day. I want to do something special for you. Mr. Pierce, you're already doing so much, she protested. I want to throw a party for your grandmother, Jonathan said, the idea forming as he spoke. A celebration for all the years she spent raising you and working to provide for your family. We could invite all her friends and neighbors, have it catered, maybe even hire a small band. Camille's eyes filled with tears. You would do that for Grandma? She raised the woman who saved my children, Jonathan replied. She deserves to be celebrated. Mr. Pierce, Camille began, but emotion made it hard for her to speak. Let me do this, Jonathan said gently. Please. It would make me happy to honor the woman who gave the world such a special person. Camille nodded, wiping her eyes. Grandma would love that. She hasn't had a real celebration in years. As they planned the party together over the next few days, Jonathan found himself looking forward to meeting Dorothy Washington and learning more about the family that had shaped Camille into the remarkable woman she was. He was also beginning to realize that his feelings for Camille were growing beyond simple gratitude and respect. But he was careful not to examine those feelings too closely. After all, she worked for him, and there was a significant difference in their social and economic positions. The last thing he wanted was to make her uncomfortable or to risk losing the best thing that had ever happened to his children. But as he watched her with Ethan and Emma, he couldn't help but think that this was what a real family looked like. Not perfect or fancy, but filled with genuine love and care. The billionaire who thought he had everything was beginning to understand that he had been missing the most important thing of all. The community center in Brooklyn had never hosted anything quite like Dorothy Washington's celebration party. Jonathan had arranged for professional decorators to transform the modest space with elegant but warm decorations, a full catering spread, and a jazz trio that reminded Dorothy of the music from her youth. "Child, I cannot believe you did all this for me," Dorothy said to Jonathan, tears in her eyes as she surveyed the room filled with her friends, neighbors, and fellow church members. She was wearing a beautiful new dress that Camille had bought for the occasion, and her silver hair was styled perfectly. "Mrs. Washington, this is the least I could do for the woman who raised Camille," Jonathan replied, offering Dorothy his arm as they walked around the party. "Everyone here has been telling me stories about how you helped their families over the years. You deserve to be celebrated." Jonathan was dressed more casually than usual in khakis and a simple button-down shirt, wanting to fit in with the community gathering rather than stand out as the wealthy outsider he technically was. He carried baby Emma while Camille held Ethan, both twins dressed in adorable outfits that matched the party's color scheme. "Mr. Pierce," said Mrs. Johnson, Dorothy's longtime neighbor, "Camille tells us you're letting her go to college while she works for you. That's mighty generous of a boss." "Camille is much more than an employee," Jonathan replied, looking over at where Camille was introducing the twins to a group of elderly church ladies. "She's family." The word surprised him as he said it, but he realized it was true. Over the past month, Camille had become an essential part of their daily lives. Not just as a caregiver for the twins, but as someone who made their house feel like a home. "That girl has been special since she was 7 years old," said Mr. Roberts, Dorothy's friend from church. "Lost her parents in that terrible accident, but she never let it make her bitter. Always helping others, always smiling, always making the best of things." Jonathan listened to story after story about Camille's kindness and generosity throughout her life. How she had helped elderly neighbors with their groceries, tutored children for free, and organized fundraisers for families in need. It painted a picture of someone who had been caring for others her entire life, often at the expense of her own needs and dreams. "She used to write papers about becoming a teacher," Dorothy told Jonathan as they sat together watching Camille interact with the party guests. "Had all these ideas about how to help children learn better. But after high school there just wasn't money for college. She never complained though. Just started working and taking care of me." "She still wants to teach," Jonathan said. "She's enrolled in early childhood development classes starting next month." "I know," Dorothy smiled. "She's so excited. Stays up late reading textbooks she ordered online. That girl has been waiting 28 years to follow her dreams." Across the room, Camille was sitting with a group of children, the twins on her lap, reading from a picture book she had brought. The children were completely captivated by her animated reading style, and even the adults had stopped their conversations to listen. "She's natural with children," Jonathan observed. "Always has been," Dorothy agreed. "When she was just 8 years old, she used to babysit the neighbor kids while their mama worked double shifts. Never asked for payment, just loved taking care of them." Jonathan felt a familiar tightness in his chest as he watched Camille make funny voices for the different characters in the book. Emma and Ethan were laughing along with the other children, completely comfortable and happy in her arms. "Mrs. Washington," Jonathan said carefully, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course, honey. Do you think Camille is happy? Really happy? I know she says she loves caring for the twins, but sometimes I worry that I'm taking advantage of her generous nature." Dorothy studied Jonathan's face for a moment, noting the genuine concern and something else in his expression that she recognized but didn't comment on directly. "Let me tell you something about my granddaughter," Dorothy said. "Camille has never been happier in her entire life. She calls me every night talking about those babies like they're her own children. She tells me about their little milestones, their funny expressions, how Ethan likes to grab her hair and how Emma smiles when she hears Camille's voice." Jonathan listened intently. "But you know what else she talks about?" Dorothy continued with a knowing smile. "She talks about you. How hard you work to be a good father, how much you love those babies, how you always ask about my health and treat her with respect." Jonathan felt heat rise in his cheeks. "Mrs. Washington, I hope I haven't done anything inappropriate. I would never want to make Camille uncomfortable." "Oh honey," Dorothy laughed gently, "you haven't done anything wrong. But I've raised that girl and I know when she's developing feelings for someone. The question is, what are you planning to do about it?" Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, watching Camille help the children act out scenes from the book. "I care about her very much," he admitted. "More than I probably should, considering she works for me." "Why shouldn't you care about her?" Dorothy asked. "She's a beautiful, kind, intelligent woman who loves your children like they're her own." "Because I'm her employer," Jonathan said. "Because I'm wealthy and she's not. Because people will say she's only interested in my money, and that's not fair to her." Dorothy nodded thoughtfully. "Those are real concerns," she said. "But let me ask you this. Do you believe Camille is the kind of person who would pretend to have feelings for financial gain?" "Absolutely not," Jonathan replied immediately. "Then maybe the question isn't whether you should have feelings for her, but whether you're brave enough to explore them honestly." Their conversation was interrupted when Camille approached with both twins who were getting fussy. "I think someone needs a diaper change and someone else is getting hungry," she said with a smile. "I'll take them home," Jonathan offered, but Dorothy waved him off. "Nonsense. There's a quiet room in the back where you can take care of the babies. This party is for celebrating, not leaving early." As Camille and Jonathan tended to the twins in the back room, they worked together with the easy rhythm they had developed over the past month. Jonathan changed Ethan's diaper while Camille prepared Emma's bottle, then they switched tasks seamlessly. "Your grandmother is an amazing woman," Jonathan said as he fed Ethan. "I can see where you get your strength and kindness." "She's the best person I know," Camille replied, gently rocking Emma. "Thank you for doing this for her. She's been glowing all week, telling everyone about the party." "Thank you for letting me into your world," Jonathan said. "Meeting your family and friends, seeing where you come from, it means a lot to me." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, both focused on the babies but aware of each other's presence in a way that felt increasingly natural and right. "Mr. Pierce," Camille said softly, "can I tell you something?" "Of course." "And Camille, when we're not in front of other people, you can call me Jonathan." "Jonathan," she repeated, smiling at the sound of his name. "I want you to know that this job, caring for Emma and Ethan, it's not just work for me. I love these babies like they're my own." "I know you do," Jonathan replied. "I can see it every day in how you care for them." "I also want you to know that I admire you as a father," Camille continued. "I know it's been hard doing this alone, but you never give up on them. You always put their needs first." Jonathan felt emotion welling up. "Sometimes I feel like I'm failing them, like I don't know what I'm doing." "Every parent feels that way sometimes," Camille said gently. "But love makes up for a lot of uncertainty. And you love them so much." As they finished feeding the twins and prepared to rejoin the party, Jonathan realized that Dorothy was right. His feelings for Camille were becoming impossible to ignore. But more than that, he was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, she might feel the same way about him. The question was whether he was brave enough to risk the perfect situation they had built for the chance at something even better. Back at the party, as they danced with the twins to the jazz trio's gentle music, surrounded by Camille's loving community, Jonathan allowed himself to imagine what it might be like if this feeling of family and belonging could become permanent. The billionaire who had thought he needed wealth and status to find happiness was learning that the most valuable things in life came from the heart, not the bank account. 2 months after Dorothy's celebration party, Jonathan and Camille had settled into a comfortable routine that felt more like a partnership than an employer-employee relationship. The twins were thriving, sleeping through the night, and beginning to show distinct personalities. Emma was curious and gentle, while Ethan was more active and social. On a rainy Saturday afternoon, while the twins napped, Jonathan found Camille in the kitchen preparing homemade baby food. She had convinced him to let her introduce fresh, organic foods instead of relying solely on store-bought options. "That smells incredible," Jonathan said, watching her puree sweet potatoes and carrots. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "Grandma taught me," Camille replied, stirring the mixture. "She always said food made with love tastes better than anything you can buy." Jonathan sat at the kitchen island, something he rarely did before Camille arrived. The kitchen had been purely functional, used mainly by his housekeeper for basic meal preparation. Now it felt like the heart of the home, with Camille's personal touches making it warm and inviting. "Tell me more about growing up with your grandmother," Jonathan said. "What was it like?" Camille smiled, continuing to work. It was different from what most kids experienced, I think. Grandma worked long hours, so I learned to be independent early. But when she was home, she made every moment count. She paused, her expression growing thoughtful. After my parents died, I was angry for a long time. I didn't understand why they had to leave me. Grandma never tried to replace them or make me forget them. Instead, she helped me remember the love they gave me in the short time we had. That must have been incredibly difficult for both of you, Jonathan said softly. Grandma was 57 when she took me in, Camille continued. She was supposed to be slowing down, maybe traveling or enjoying retirement. Instead, she was raising a traumatized 7-year-old. But she never made me feel like a burden. Jonathan felt a deep respect for Dorothy Washington. He couldn't imagine the sacrifice and strength it had taken to raise a child at that stage of her life. What about you? Camille asked, turning to face him. What was your childhood like? Jonathan was quiet for a moment. He rarely talked about his past, finding it easier to focus on business and the present. But something about the intimate atmosphere of the kitchen and Camille's open sharing made him want to be honest. Very different from yours, he said finally. I grew up with every material advantage, but my parents were distant. They were both successful business people who saw having a child as another achievement to check off their list. That sounds lonely, Camille observed, her voice gentle and non-judgmental. It was, Jonathan admitted. I had nannies, tutors, boarding schools. The best of everything except genuine affection. My parents loved me in their way, but they didn't know how to show it. Everything was about achievement and success. Camille stopped her food preparation and gave him her full attention. Is that why you work so hard now? To prove something? Jonathan considered the question seriously. Maybe. I built my company to show them I could succeed on my own terms. But even after they passed away 5 years ago, I kept pushing, kept working 18-hour days. I thought that's what success looked like. And now? Camille asked. Now I think success looks like Emma laughing when I make funny faces or Ethan falling asleep on my chest. It looks like having someone in my home who genuinely cares about my children. He paused. It looks like having real conversations in my kitchen instead of eating alone in my office. The honesty in his voice made Camille's heart race. Over the past 2 months, she had begun to see Jonathan as more than just her employer. She saw how tender he was with the twins, how he worried about their well-being, how he always asked about her grandmother's health. She noticed how he had started working from home more often, not just to be near the babies, but to be part of their daily life. Jonathan, she said carefully, can I ask you something personal? Always, he replied. Do you ever think about having more children? About finding someone to share parenting with? Jonathan felt his pulse quicken. This conversation was heading into territory they had been carefully avoiding for weeks. I used to think I needed to find the right wife to be a proper mother for the twins, he said slowly. Someone from the right background with the right education and social connections. And now? Camille asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Now I think the twins already have the best mother they could ask for, Jonathan said, looking directly into her eyes. Someone who loves them unconditionally, who understands their needs, who makes our house feel like a home. The kitchen fell silent except for the gentle sound of rain against the windows. Both of them understood the implication of Jonathan's words, but neither was quite ready to voice what they were feeling. The moment was interrupted by the sound of Emma crying from the nursery. Camille quickly turned off the stove and headed toward the stairs, but Jonathan caught her hand gently. Camille, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I need you to know that whatever happens between us, you and the twins are the most important things in my life now. I know, she replied, squeezing his hand. And Jonathan? You've become the most important people in my life too. They looked at each other for a long moment, both aware that they were standing at the edge of something that could change everything. Then Emma's cries grew more insistent, and they broke apart to tend to the babies. Later that evening, after the twins were asleep and they had shared a quiet dinner together, Camille and Jonathan found themselves on the penthouse balcony, looking out at the city lights. I have something to confess, Camille said, wrapping her arms around herself in the cool evening air. What's that? Jonathan asked, offering her his jacket. I never thought I'd work for someone like you, she said, accepting the jacket gratefully. When I first met you at the cathedral, I thought you'd be arrogant and demanding. I thought you'd treat me like just another employee. And what do you think now? Jonathan asked, genuinely curious. I think you're one of the kindest men I've ever met, Camille replied honestly. I think you care more about being a good father than being a successful businessman. I think you see people for who they really are, not just their job titles or bank accounts. Jonathan moved closer to her, close enough that she could smell his cologne and feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I have a confession too," he said. "I've been trying not to fall in love with you for the past month." Camille's breath caught. "How's that working out for you?" "Terribly," Jonathan admitted with a rueful smile. "I think I was already in love with you before I even admitted it to myself." "Jonathan," Camille said softly, turning to face him fully. "I know this complicates everything," he said quickly. "I know there are a million reasons why this might not work. I know people will have opinions about our different backgrounds. What do you know about what I want?" Camille asked, stepping closer to him. "Tell me," Jonathan said, his voice barely audible. "I want to be part of your family," Camille said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Not just as an employee but as someone who loves you and those babies with everything I have." Jonathan reached up to cup her face gently. "Are you sure? Because once we cross this line, there's no going back." "I'm sure," Camille whispered. "Are you?" Instead of answering with words, Jonathan leaned down and kissed her softly, a gentle kiss filled with months of suppressed emotion and genuine love. When they broke apart, both of them were smiling. "So what happens now?" Camille asked. "Now we figure it out together," Jonathan replied, pulling her close. "One day at a time as a family." As they stood together on the balcony, looking out at the city where they had first met, both Jonathan and Camille felt the rightness of the moment. The billionaire and the cleaning lady had found something more valuable than money or status. They had found real love, built on mutual respect, shared values, and a deep commitment to the two little souls sleeping peacefully inside. The foundation of their relationship had been laid through caring for Emma and Ethan together, and now they were ready to build something beautiful and lasting on that solid ground. The morning after their first kiss, Camille woke up with butterflies in her stomach and a smile she couldn't hide. She had spent the night at her grandmother's apartment, needing time to process the enormous shift in her relationship with Jonathan. As she got ready for work, she caught herself humming and had to laugh at how happy she felt. "You're glowing, baby girl," Dorothy observed over breakfast, studying Camille's face with knowing eyes. "Something happened yesterday." Camille couldn't keep the secret from the woman who had raised her. "Grandma, Jonathan and we talked about our feelings. And we kissed." Dorothy set down her coffee cup and smiled broadly. "It's about time. That man has been in love with you for weeks. Anyone with eyes could see it. Are you okay with this?" Camille asked nervously. "I know it's complicated. He's my employer and he's wealthy and people might think." "Honey," Dorothy interrupted gently, "do you love him?" "Yes," Camille answered without hesitation. "I love him and I love those babies like they're my own." "And does he treat you with respect and kindness?" "Always," Camille replied. "Then that's all that matters," Dorothy said firmly. "Love doesn't care about bank accounts or job titles. Love cares about character, and you both have good hearts." When Camille arrived at the penthouse, she felt nervous for the first time in months. What if the morning light had changed Jonathan's feelings? What if he regretted their conversation? Her worries disappeared the moment she saw him. Jonathan was in the kitchen making coffee, still in his pajamas and robe with bed-rumpled hair. The moment he saw her, his whole face lit up with a smile that took her breath away. "Good morning," he said softly, crossing the room to her. "I was worried you might regret last night." "Never," Camille said, accepting the gentle kiss he offered. "But I was worried you might." "The only thing I regret is waiting so long to tell you how I feel," Jonathan replied, wrapping his arms around her. Their romantic moment was interrupted by the sound of babbling from the nursery. Emma and Ethan were awake and ready to start their day. "Ready to be a family?" Jonathan asked, taking Camille's hand. "More than ready," she replied, squeezing his fingers. Over the next few weeks, they navigated their new relationship carefully. During the day, when household staff or business associates were around, they maintained a professional demeanor. But in private moments, when it was just them and the twins, they allowed their love to show freely. Camille moved some of her belongings into the guest room, though she and Jonathan agreed to take their physical relationship slowly. They wanted to build something solid and lasting, not rush into anything that might complicate their roles as parents to the twins. "We have forever," Jonathan told her one evening as they tucked the babies into their cribs. "I want to do this right." Their love story was playing out in small, beautiful moments. Jonathan reading bedtime stories while Camille cleaned up the kitchen. Camille teaching Jonathan to cook simple meals. Both of them taking turns with middle-of-the-night feedings, working as a team even when exhausted. One Saturday morning, as they were playing with the twins in the living room, Jonathan's doorman called to announce visitors. "Mr. Pierce, your brother and sister-in-law are here to see you." Jonathan's expression immediately tensed. "Send them up," he said reluctantly. "Your brother?" Camille asked, noting his change in demeanor. "Richard and his wife Helen," Jonathan explained, quickly picking up baby toys and straightening the room. "They're judgmental people. Very focused on social status and appearances." Camille understood immediately. "Do you want me to take the twins to the nursery?" "No," Jonathan said firmly, taking her hand. "You're part of this family. I want them to meet you." When Richard and Helen Pierce arrived, the contrast with Jonathan was immediately apparent. Richard was wearing an expensive suit despite it being Saturday morning, and Helen was dressed as if she were attending a charity luncheon. Both looked around the living room with barely concealed disapproval at the baby toys and family atmosphere. "Jonathan," Richard said stiffly, "we heard about the wedding disaster and came to check on you." "That was months ago, Richard," Jonathan replied. "I'm doing very well, thank you." Helen's eyes fixed on Camille, who was holding Emma while Ethan played on his blanket. "And who is this?" "This is Camille Washington," Jonathan said proudly. "Camille, these are my brother Richard and his wife Helen." "It's lovely to meet you both," Camille said politely, though she could feel their disapproval radiating across the room. "Is she the nanny?" Helen asked Jonathan, as if Camille wasn't standing right there. "Camille is much more than that," Jonathan replied, his voice carrying a warning edge. "She's the woman I love and she's going to be my wife." Camille's eyes widened in surprise. They hadn't discussed marriage yet, though she had hoped they were heading in that direction. But Jonathan's public declaration felt right and natural. "Your wife?" Richard sputtered. "Jonathan, you can't be serious. What do you know about this woman? What's her background? Her family connections?" "I know she has a beautiful heart," Jonathan replied calmly. "I know she loves my children unconditionally. I know she makes me a better man and our house a real home." "But Jonathan," Helen said in a condescending tone, "surely you understand the social implications. What will people say? What about your business relationships?" "I understand that anyone who judges me for loving a wonderful woman is not someone I want in my life," Jonathan replied firmly. "Can you imagine having to defend the person you love because of their background? What would you do in Jonathan's situation? Share your thoughts below and subscribe to see how this family overcomes every obstacle thrown their way." Richard and Helen exchanged meaningful looks before Richard spoke again. "Jonathan, we're concerned about your judgment. Perhaps you're not thinking clearly because of the stress of single parenthood." "My judgment has never been clearer," Jonathan said, moving to stand beside Camille and putting his arm around her shoulders. "Camille saved my children when no one else could. She brings joy and love to our lives every day. If you can't accept that, then you're not welcome here." "Don't make decisions you'll regret," Helen warned. "Think about your children's future, their social standing. Their future will be built on love, kindness, and genuine human connection." Camille spoke up for the first time since the introductions. "The same values my grandmother instilled in me when she raised me after my parents died." "How tragic," Helen said in a fake sympathetic voice that fooled no one. "It was," Camille agreed. "But it taught me what's truly important in life. Family isn't about money or social status. It's about people who love and support each other unconditionally." Richard and Helen left shortly after, clearly displeased with the direction of the conversation. After they were gone, Jonathan pulled Camille into his arms. "I'm sorry about that," he said. "They've always been like that, but I should have warned you better." "You don't need to apologize for loving me," Camille replied. "But did you mean what you said? About marriage?" Jonathan knelt down in front of her, taking her hands in his while Emma babbled happily in her baby seat and Ethan played with his toys nearby. "Camille Washington," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I know I don't have a ring yet, and this isn't the romantic proposal you deserve, but I can't wait another minute to ask. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and the mother of our children?" Tears streamed down Camille's face as she nodded. "Yes, Jonathan. Yes to all of it." As they kissed, surrounded by the babies who had brought them together, both Jonathan and Camille knew they were choosing love over convention, authenticity over approval. It wouldn't always be easy, but they would face whatever came together as a family built on the strongest foundation possible: genuine love and mutual respect. The billionaire who had once thought he needed society's approval to be happy had learned that the only approval that mattered was from the people he loved. And the cleaning lady who had always put others first had found someone who valued her heart above everything else. The announcement of Jonathan Pierce's engagement to Camille Washington sent shockwaves through New York's high society circles and business community. Within days of the news breaking, Jonathan's phone was flooded with calls from board members, business partners, and social acquaintances, all expressing their concerns about his choice of bride. Camille first became aware of the intensity of the backlash when she picked up a newspaper at the corner store near her grandmother's apartment. The gossip section featured a large photo of her and Jonathan leaving a restaurant with the twins under the headline, "Billionaire Cinderella, from cleaning lady to high society bride." The article was cruel and invasive, questioning Camille's motives and suggesting she was a gold digger who had manipulated a vulnerable single father. They had somehow obtained details about her background, her 3 previous jobs, and even her parents' death, presenting everything in the most unflattering light possible. "Baby girl, don't you read that trash," Dorothy said firmly, taking the newspaper from Camille's shaking hands. "People who write that garbage don't know your heart." But the damage was done. Camille felt sick reading the implications that she was using the twins to trap a wealthy man. The article suggested she had deliberately targeted Jonathan, planning the whole relationship from their first meeting at the cathedral. When she arrived at the penthouse that morning, she could see that Jonathan had been dealing with his own share of negative attention. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "The board wants to meet with me today," he told her without preamble. "Some of my biggest investors are threatening to pull out if I go through with the marriage." Camille felt her heart sink. "Maybe they're right, Jonathan. Maybe this is too much disruption for your business." "Don't you dare," Jonathan said fiercely, crossing the room to hold her face in his hands. "Don't let their small minds make you doubt what we have. But your company, your livelihood, will survive just fine without people who judge based on prejudice and social status," Jonathan finished. "Camille, I've built my success on making smart decisions and trusting my instincts. My instincts tell me that marrying you is the smartest decision I'll ever make." Despite his confident words, the pressure continued to mount over the following weeks. Jonathan's exclusive country club rescinded his membership. Several high-profile charity organizations asked him to step down from their boards. Prominent families canceled business deals and social invitations. The hardest blow came when Jonathan's longtime business partner, Michael Stanford, requested a private meeting. "Jonathan, I've known you for 15 years, Michael said as they sat in Jonathan's office. "You're like a brother to me. That's why I feel I have to say this." "Say what?" Jonathan asked, though he dreaded the answer. "This woman, this Camille, are you sure she loves you for the right reasons? Are you sure this isn't about your money and lifestyle?" Jonathan's jaw tightened. "Michael, Camille loved my children before she even knew my net worth. She makes me a better man, not a richer one." "But Jonathan, think about the practical implications," Michael pressed. "What happens when the novelty wears off? What happens when she realizes how different your worlds really are?" "Our worlds aren't different anymore," Jonathan replied firmly. "We've created a new world together, one that's better than anything I had before." Meanwhile, Camille was facing her own challenges. When she went to pick up groceries, she noticed people whispering and pointing. The daycare center where she volunteered asked her to take a temporary leave of absence, concerned that her presence might attract unwanted media attention that could disrupt the children's routines. Most painfully, some of her longtime friends and neighbors began treating her differently. At Dorothy's church, several congregation members made pointed comments about forgetting where you come from and putting on airs. "Maybe they're right," Camille told Jonathan one evening as they sat in his study after putting the twins to bed. "Maybe I am forgetting where I come from." "Where you come from is a place of love, kindness, and strong values," Jonathan replied. "Those things don't change based on who you marry or where you live." "But I don't fit in your world, Jonathan," Camille said sadly. "I don't know about wine or art or the social rules that govern your circles. I feel like I'm embarrassing you." "You could never embarrass me," Jonathan said passionately. "You're the most genuine person I've ever met. If my world can't appreciate that, then I don't want to be part of it anymore." The breaking point came when Richard Pierce arranged what he called a family intervention. He invited Jonathan to dinner under the pretense of wanting to meet Camille properly, but instead had assembled a group of Jonathan's business associates and family friends to pressure him into ending the engagement. "Jonathan, we're all here because we care about you," Richard began as they sat around the formal dining room table. "We think you're making a mistake that will damage not just your reputation, but your children's future prospects." "My children's future prospects depend on them being raised by people who love them," Jonathan replied evenly. "Camille loves them more than their own biological mother ever did." "But think about their social standing," insisted Mrs. Pemberton, a family friend. "Think about what schools they'll be able to attend, what circles they'll move in. I think about raising them to be kind, compassionate human beings who judge people by their character, not their bank accounts, Jonathan shot back. The dinner continued with various guests making increasingly insulting suggestions about Camille's motives and background. Finally, Jonathan had enough. I want to make something very clear to everyone in this room, he said, standing up. Camille Washington is the best thing that has ever happened to me and my children. She has brought love, warmth, and genuine happiness into our lives. If any of you cannot respect that, then we have nothing further to discuss. He left the dinner immediately and drove straight to Dorothy's apartment, where he found Camille helping her grandmother with her evening medications. Jonathan, Camille said in surprise. What are you doing here? I need to talk to both of you, he said, looking at Dorothy as well. Mrs. Washington, I want you to know that I love your granddaughter more than I thought it was possible to love another person. I also want you to know that people are saying terrible things about our relationship, trying to convince me that Camille is wrong for me. And what do you say to those people? Dorothy asked quietly. I say they're wrong, Jonathan replied firmly. I say they don't know what real love looks like because they've never had it. Dorothy smiled and patted the chair beside her. Sit down, son. Let me tell you something about my granddaughter. Jonathan sat and Dorothy took his hand. Camille has been taking care of people her whole life, Dorothy said. She took care of me when I was sick, she took care of neighborhood children, she took care of anyone who needed help. She's never asked for anything in return. Now someone wants to take care of her for a change, and that's beautiful. She turned to Camille, who had tears in her eyes. Baby girl, don't let other people's jealousy and small minds steal your joy. You found a good man who loves you and those babies. That's a blessing, not something to be ashamed of. But Grandma, Camille said, what if I really don't belong in his world? Then you'll make a new world together, Dorothy replied wisely. That's what people who really love each other do. As Jonathan and Camille drove back to the penthouse that night, both of them felt stronger and more committed than ever. The pressure from society was intense, but their love was stronger. Are you ready to face whatever comes next? Jonathan asked as they stood in the nursery, watching their peacefully sleeping twins. As long as we face it together, Camille replied, taking his hand. The billionaire and his bride-to-be had weathered the storm of social disapproval and emerged more united than ever. They had learned that true acceptance could only come from people who valued love over status, and those were the only opinions that truly mattered. The pressure from society reached its peak when Jonathan received an ultimatum from the board of directors of Pierce Industries. They had called an emergency meeting, and Jonathan sat at the head of the polished conference table, facing 12 stern faces that had once been allies and supporters. Jonathan, said board chairman William Ashford, a man who had been friends with Jonathan's father, we've given you time to reconsider this engagement, but your continued refusal to see reason is affecting company performance. How exactly is my personal life affecting company performance? Jonathan asked coolly. Stock prices have dropped 12% since news of your engagement broke, explained board member Patricia Morse. 3 major investors have pulled their support. The Whitman Foundation canceled their contract with us. And the Henderson Group is reconsidering their merger deal, added another board member. They're concerned about the company's image and leadership stability. Jonathan listened without interruption, his face revealing nothing of the turmoil inside. These people had helped him build his empire, but now they were asking him to choose between his business success and his family's happiness. We're prepared to offer you a solution, William continued. End the engagement, and we'll issue a statement saying you've reconsidered for the sake of business stability. We'll help manage the media narrative, and things can return to normal. And if I refuse? Jonathan asked. Then we'll have to consider whether new leadership might be necessary for the company's welfare, Patricia said bluntly. The room fell silent. Jonathan looked around the table at faces he had trusted for years, people he had considered friends and mentors. Now they were threatening to remove him from the company he had built with his own hands. I need some time to consider your position, Jonathan said finally. We'll reconvene tomorrow morning. That evening, Jonathan sat in his study, staring at financial reports and projections. If he lost control of Pierce Industries, it would affect not just him, but hundreds of employees and their families. The company was his legacy, the culmination of 15 years of hard work and sacrifice. Camille found him there at midnight, still dressed in his business suit, surrounded by papers. You should be sleeping, she said softly, entering the room. I can't sleep, Jonathan admitted. Camille, there's something I need to tell you about the board meeting today. As he explained the ultimatum, Camille's face grew pale. She sat in the chair across from his desk, listening without interrupting until he finished. "They want you to choose between me and your company," she said quietly. "They want me to choose between love and money," Jonathan corrected. "It's not really a choice at all." "Jonathan," Camille said carefully, "Pierce Industries is your life's work. You've built something incredible that provides jobs for hundreds of people. Maybe we should consider what they're asking." "Are you saying you want to end our engagement?" Jonathan asked, his voice strained. "I'm saying I love you too much to be the reason you lose everything you've worked for," Camille replied, tears starting to fall. "I've always known this day might come. I've always known that loving you might cost too much." Jonathan came around the desk and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "Camille, listen to me very carefully," he said intensely. "I had everything I thought I wanted before I met you. Money, success, social status. And I was miserable. I was lonely, my children were unhappy, and my life felt empty." He wiped tears from her cheeks with his thumbs. "You and Emma and Ethan are my everything now," he continued. "You've shown me what real wealth looks like. A family that loves each other, a home filled with laughter, children who are happy and secure. I won't trade that for any amount of money or business success. But your legacy, your father's company?" "My legacy is those two beautiful children sleeping upstairs and the woman who loves them like her own," Jonathan said firmly. "My father's company can survive without me, but my family cannot." The next morning, Jonathan walked into the boardroom with a calm confidence that surprised the assembled directors. He had made his choice and he was at peace with it. "Gentlemen, ladies," he began, standing at the head of the table rather than sitting, "I've given considerable thought to your ultimatum." "And?" William asked expectantly. "I choose love," Jonathan said simply. "I choose my family. I choose the woman who saved my children and gave meaning to my life." The board members exchanged glances, some looking disappointed, others angry. "Jonathan, you're making a terrible mistake," Patricia said. "You're throwing away everything for a woman who—" "Who what?" Jonathan interrupted, his voice sharp. "Who loves my children unconditionally. Who works harder than anyone in this room. Who has more integrity and kindness than all of us combined." He looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes. "If you cannot see the value in that, then you're not the people I thought you were, and this is not the company I want to lead." "Are you resigning?" William asked, clearly shocked that Jonathan was standing firm. "I'm giving you the choice," Jonathan replied. "Accept my personal decisions and continue our business relationship, or remove me and face the consequences of losing the CEO who built this company into what it is today." The room erupted in heated discussion. Several board members argued for accepting Jonathan's position, pointing out that replacing him would be nearly impossible and incredibly disruptive to company operations. Others insisted that his judgment was compromised and he needed to be removed for the good of the business. After 2 hours of debate, they reached a decision. "Jonathan," William said finally, "the board has voted. We're willing to accept your engagement on one condition: the wedding must be small and private. No media circus, no public spectacle that could further damage the company's image." Jonathan smiled for the first time that day. "Agreed. Camille and I prefer a small, intimate ceremony anyway." As he left the boardroom, Jonathan felt lighter than he had in weeks. He had chosen love over fear, family over social expectations, and his own happiness over others' approval. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but he would walk it with the people who mattered most. When he arrived home, he found Camille in the nursery reading to the twins. She looked up anxiously as he entered. "How did it go?" she asked nervously. "We're getting married," Jonathan said, lifting her from the chair and spinning her around. "We're getting married, and anyone who doesn't like it can find somewhere else to invest their money." Emma and Ethan babbled happily from their cribs, as if they understood that their family was going to stay together. "Are you sure?" Camille asked, though her smile was radiant. "Are you sure you won't regret choosing us over everything else?" "I'm not choosing you over everything else," Jonathan replied, pulling her close. "I'm choosing the only thing that matters." As they held each other in the nursery, surrounded by the sounds of their happy children, both Jonathan and Camille knew they had weathered the worst of the storm. Society might continue to judge them, business associates might continue to disapprove, but their love had proven stronger than any external pressure. The billionaire who had once measured success in dollars and deals had learned to measure it in love and laughter. And the woman who had always put others first had found someone who put her happiness above everything else in the world. Their choice was made, and they would face the future together as a family united by the strongest force on earth: unconditional love. 6 months later, on a perfect spring morning, the same cathedral where Jonathan and Camille had first met was being prepared for a very different kind of wedding. Instead of the elaborate decorations and 500 guests from Jonathan's first attempt at marriage, this ceremony would be intimate and meaningful, focused on love rather than spectacle. Camille stood in the small bridal preparation room, wearing a simple but elegant cream-colored dress that Dorothy had helped her choose. It wasn't a traditional white gown, but something she could wear again, something that represented her practical nature and genuine values. "You look beautiful, baby girl," Dorothy said, adjusting Camille's pearl necklace, a gift from Jonathan that had belonged to his grandmother. "Your parents would be so proud." "I wish they could be here," Camille said softly, looking at herself in the mirror. "They are here," Dorothy replied firmly. "They're in your heart, in the love you give those babies, in the kindness you show everyone you meet." A gentle knock on the door interrupted them. Archbishop Williams entered, smiling broadly. "The groom is getting nervous," he said with a chuckle. "And 2 very special flower babies are ready to make their debut." Camille's heart raced with excitement and joy. She had never imagined that 10-month-old Emma and Ethan would be part of her wedding ceremony, but Jonathan had insisted that the babies who brought them together should be present for their union. In the main chapel, 50 guests were seated: Dorothy and her church friends, neighbors from Camille's Brooklyn community, a few of Jonathan's loyal employees, and surprisingly, several board members who had come to respect Camille over the past months. Jonathan stood at the altar wearing a simple dark suit, his hair perfectly styled but his face showing the nervous excitement of a man about to marry the woman of his dreams. Beside him, his best man held baby Ethan, who was wearing a tiny tuxedo and a huge smile. The music began and all eyes turned to see Camille walking down the aisle, carrying baby Emma, who was dressed in a miniature version of her mother's cream-colored dress. There was no traditional processional. Instead, Camille walked with confidence and joy toward the man and children who had become her entire world. When she reached the altar, Jonathan's eyes were bright with tears of happiness. "You're beautiful," he whispered as she took her place beside him. Archbishop Williams smiled at the unconventional family before him. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today not just to witness the union of Jonathan and Camille, but to celebrate the formation of a family built on love, sacrifice, and mutual devotion." As the ceremony continued, Emma babbled happily in Camille's arms while Ethan clapped his hands from his position with the best man. The babies seemed to understand that this was a special day, remaining content and adding their own joyful sounds to the proceedings. "Jonathan," Archbishop Williams said, "do you take Camille to be your wife, to love and cherish her, and to raise your children together in a home filled with love and faith?" "I do," Jonathan said clearly, his voice carrying across the chapel. "I take Camille as my wife, my partner, and the mother of our children." "Camille," the Archbishop continued, "do you take Jonathan to be your husband, to love and support him, and to be a mother to Emma and Ethan as if they were born from your own heart?" "I do," Camille replied, her voice strong and certain. "I take Jonathan as my husband, and I take Emma and Ethan as my children, to love and protect for the rest of my life." Instead of traditional rings, they exchanged family rings that included small stones representing each member of their family: Jonathan, Camille, Emma, and Ethan. It was a symbol that their marriage was about more than just 2 people. It was about the creation of a family unit bound by love and commitment. "By the power vested in me," Archbishop Williams announced, "I now pronounce you husband and wife, and I declare Emma and Ethan to be the beloved children of both parents. You may kiss your bride, Jonathan." As Jonathan and Camille shared their first kiss as husband and wife, the chapel erupted in applause and celebration. Emma clapped her tiny hands while Ethan giggled with delight, as if they too understood the significance of the moment. The reception was held in the same community center where Dorothy's celebration had taken place months earlier. Instead of an elaborate catered affair, it was a potluck celebration where guests brought their favorite dishes to share. Dorothy's church friends had provided music, and children from the neighborhood ran around playing games while adults shared stories and laughter. "This is perfect," Camille told Jonathan as they swayed together during their first dance, with Emma and Ethan in their arms. "This is exactly what I dreamed of. A year ago, I thought the perfect wedding required crystal chandeliers and 500 guests," Jonathan replied. "Now I know it just requires the people you love most." As the evening progressed, guests took turns sharing stories about the couple. Dorothy spoke about watching Camille grow from a heartbroken 7-year-old into a woman capable of transforming lives through love. Jonathan's assistant Rebecca shared how the office atmosphere had changed since Camille entered his life, making him more patient and joyful. "Have you ever witnessed a love story that restored your faith in true love?" What makes a wedding truly special in your opinion? Share your thoughts and memories below, and don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming stories that prove love always wins. But the most touching moment came when Mrs. Johnson, Dorothy's elderly neighbor, stood to speak. "I've known Camille since she was a little girl," she said, her voice wavering with emotion. "I watched her work 3 jobs to take care of her grandmother, never complaining, always helping others. When I heard she was marrying a billionaire, some folks said she was just after his money." She paused, looking directly at Jonathan and Camille. "But I've seen them together with those babies. I've seen how they look at each other, how they work as a team, how they put family first. This isn't about money or status. This is about 2 people who were meant to find each other." The crowd applauded and several people wiped away tears. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, Jonathan and Camille found themselves on the community center's small balcony, holding the twins who had fallen asleep in their arms. "No regrets?" Camille asked softly. "Only that I didn't meet you sooner," Jonathan replied. "Only that Emma and Ethan had to go through their first months without you." "They have me now," Camille said, kissing Emma's forehead. "We all have each other now. What do you want to do first as a married couple?" Jonathan asked. "Go home," Camille replied without hesitation. "Put our babies to bed, sit in our kitchen, and just be a family." Jonathan laughed. "A year ago, I would have said we should fly to Paris or the Maldives for our honeymoon. And now I think there's nowhere I'd rather be than home with my wife and children." As they prepared to leave the reception, Dorothy pulled them aside for a private moment. "You've built something beautiful," she told them. "Not just a marriage but a real family. Your parents would be proud, Camille. And Jonathan, you've become the man you were meant to be." 3 months later, the Pierce family was featured in a very different kind of newspaper article. This time, the headline read, "Pierce Industries reports record profits as CEO balances business success with family values." The article detailed how Jonathan's approach to leadership had evolved since his marriage, emphasizing work-life balance, employee family benefits, and community involvement. Company morale was at an all-time high, and several major investors had actually increased their stakes in the company after seeing Jonathan's improved performance and decision-making. But the real success story was happening at home. Emma and Ethan, now over a year old, were thriving under the care of their loving parents. Emma had taken her first steps while reaching for Camille, and Ethan had said his first word, "Mama," looking directly at the woman who had loved him since he was 4 months old. Camille had started her college classes in early childhood development, studying online while the twins napped and attending weekend seminars when Jonathan could watch them. She was excelling in her coursework, bringing both natural instinct and academic knowledge to her role as a mother and her future career as an educator. On their first wedding anniversary, Jonathan surprised Camille by renovating the penthouse nursery into 2 separate bedrooms for the toddlers, each decorated according to their emerging personalities. Emma's room was filled with books and soft colors, while Ethan's featured musical instruments and bright, energetic designs. "They're growing up so fast," Camille marveled as they tucked the children into their new beds. "Good thing we have forever to watch them grow," Jonathan replied, pulling his wife close. As they stood in the hallway between their children's rooms, listening to the soft sounds of Emma and Ethan settling into sleep, Jonathan and Camille reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them together. A billionaire's ruined wedding had led to a cleaning lady's unexpected opportunity. 2 crying babies had brought together 2 hearts that were meant to be one. Society's pressure had only strengthened their resolve, and love had triumphed over every obstacle. The family that had formed in crisis and been forged through challenges was now thriving in peace and happiness. They had learned that the most valuable things in life cannot be bought: genuine love, mutual respect, and the joy of raising children in a home where kindness always leads. Jonathan Pierce, who had once measured success in stock prices and profit margins, now measured it in bedtime stories and family dinners. Camille Pierce, who had spent her life caring for others, had found someone who cherished caring for her in return. And Emma and Ethan Pierce had learned from their earliest days that they were loved completely and unconditionally, not just by their father who had never given up on them, but by the woman who had chosen to be their mother through love rather than biology. The billionaire's twins who had cried non-stop at his first wedding were now sleeping peacefully in their beds, secure in the knowledge that they belonged to a family built on the strongest foundation possible: pure, unconditional love. In the end, the most unthinkable thing the cleaner had done was not calming crying babies or accepting a job offer. The most unthinkable thing was showing a broken family how to heal through the simple power of genuine love and care. Their story had become a testament to the truth that love recognizes no boundaries of class or status. that genuine connection transcends social expectations, and that the most beautiful families are often formed in the most unexpected ways. As Jonathan and Camille settled into their own bed that night, surrounded by the peaceful sounds of their sleeping children and the promise of many more years together, they knew they had found something more precious than any treasure. They had found their happily ever after.